Today we're back with another episode of Fanzine Friday. Today we're taking a look at the Dungeoneer number 2 from 1976. Please stick around. Welcome back to the channel Old School Rules, where we celebrate the community of old school gamers and grognards who love classic RPGs, miniatures, magazines, and everything else that's related to them. Here on Fanzine Friday, it's a brief video where we take a look each week at an issue from my collection of fanzines. Today we're looking at the Dungeoneer number 2. It's produced by Jennell Jaquays in the fall of 1976, and it's another fascinating example of classic fan content. Fanzines are magazines made by fans for fans of a particular hobby, and of course in our case that's RPGs with an emphasis on Dungeons and Dragons. Hope you enjoyed the video. Okay, so it's Fanzine Friday, taking a look at the Dungeoneer number 2. As we do each week, we'll take a look at this fanzine, look at the cover, look at the table of contents. If they don't have one, I'll give you one. We'll talk about that, and just enjoy some of the great RPG history from this fanzine. Here's the cover. This is Jaquays' art. Again, the art on this is fantastic, as it is in every one of these Dungeoneer fanzines. This is from the fall of 1976. It gives attribution on the front to the Fantastic Dungeoning Society, which, as I understand it, was Jaquays' gaming group. But again, as I understand it, Jaquays was essentially responsible, the driving force behind putting these fanzines together. This is great art. You've got the Conan figure there. Everybody's enjoying their alcohol. The guy on the floor has enjoyed it a little too much. You got a little something brewing here in the front with these ugly looking guards speaking to this lady. Who knows where that's going to go. But it's just a great little scene on the cover. Here's the inside cover. You get the editor's notes from Jaquays, and then a new feature called Torchlight, where they are highlighting other periodicals that are available. They talk about the Dragon, Alarums, and Excursions, which are both pretty well known, but two I'd never heard of before until I read it here. The first one's called The Cosmic Balance. It's only issue number 2, which makes me wonder, since it's been a few months, whether The Cosmic Balance or the Dungeoneer had its first issue published first. But it says this is Scott Rosenberg's home campaign, talks about his home campaign called Tyrion. But it says a lot of the material in there could be adapted to any campaign. Has some new spells, some other articles about the campaign. The other one is called the Fantorgn Scrolls. It's published in California. It says they're on issue number 14. So unless they published a whole bunch of issues all at once, this certainly seems like it was probably published before the Dungeoneer number 1. It has new weapons. It has articles on dungeon planning. So the great thing about this hobby, no matter what you know, there's always more to learn. And so now I've got some new fanzines to be on the lookout for. Here's our table of contents. This doesn't have an actual table of contents, so I put this together. You got the publisher's note we just looked at, an article called The Lovely Ladies, which is a new character classes or subclasses, the Arcane Elders, which is fantasy fiction. And I didn't really talk about that in the last video, but this same story was there. It's in, I think, the first 4 issues of the Dungeoneer have some of this story in it. It's really good fiction. And one of the things I like about it is it seems very much like the story is based on sort of the Dungeons and Dragons rules. They talk about character classes in there, the spells they cast. They refer to halflings and hobbits, which of course, remember when this comes out, it's during the old, we call OD&D, which are like the white box or the wood grain box, right? Those original rules. And so they still called halfling hobbits at the very beginning of those. Anyway, great fiction. You have the Monster Matrix, which more monsters, the Goodies Bag, which are new magic items, and then an adventure. This one's called The Fabled Garden of Merlin. And finally, another article for rules for the Dungeon Master, Referee, World Players. And so this one's alcohol in D&D. It's by Jaquays. It has some description. It has a whole chart. Reminds me of the modern DUI chart, and it talks about basically, you know, how many drinks of what type of alcohol, what's your constitution, and sort of figures out, how many drinks you can have before in a certain period of time before you become impaired, how impaired you become. So if you like bringing that kind of, rules and realism into your game, here's another article in the Dungeoneer that would be good for the gamers. So here we also have the contributors list, and if you remember the prior video, we only had 3, and now we're up to 7. And there's a very familiar name on the list, Jim Ward. I remember Jim saying how much he admired the work that was being done in the Dungeoneer and how much he enjoyed being able to be a contributor. And so we'll mention what he contributed here in just a moment. The first article I want to talk about is called The Lovely Ladies. It's by Jaquays. At least I believe that it is. And it has 3 new character classes or subclasses. And if you remember at the time, in the old OD&D, you had 3 choices: fighting men, clerics, and magic users. And so they have a new female version that you can add into your game for each of those. The first is the Valkyrie, which is the female version of a fighting man. It's essentially the same, except for it has 2 special things. It can gain a unicorn at a certain level, and then at a higher level it can gain a Pegasus as its special mount. The new addition for the female version of a cleric is called the Daughters of Delphi, and they gain a certain prophecy ability in addition to the normal clerical abilities. At the 3rd level, they gain the ability to sort of ask of their deity like a yes/no question, and their chance of getting any answer and an accurate answer goes up each level. And the other skill that they have is a sort of, at a higher level, they gain a sort of clairvoyance, where they can gain insight into an event in the past, present, or future, and similarly, chance of success that gets better over time. And finally, the magic user female subclass is called the Circean. I think I'm saying that correctly, or Circeans. And in addition to having some ability to charm men, the really interesting addition is that they can make non-magical potions, which become more potent as they gain experience levels. So things like poisons, sleeping potions, hallucinations, paralyzing potions, etc. So that's an interesting idea. These are really well done. They're very well thought out. They have experience tables and a lot of description. So a great piece of work early on to expand someone's game. The next thing I'll mention is the monster matrix. They say you can never have too many monsters, especially at this early era. And so we get some new ones this time. The first is the Fuzzies and Steelies. This is by Jaquays. Some great art there of her monsters. And so the Fuzzies are sort of these fuzzy balls, and the Steelies are made of steel. They say that they're related to beholders. They only have 1 eye. They have 4 tentacles, and the tentacles can strike and paralyze a character. They can also attack with a constriction attack, and their little arms can wield weapons, so like a dagger or a short sword. And so those are really interesting and fun additions to throw into a dungeon. The next one is called the Dragonette. It's by Bruce Jaquays, and it is a magic user has created this small dragon. I imagine you could have it in the size of your hand. It has all the different colors based on the type of dragon blood you used in the creation. They're up to a maximum of 8 hit points, but a lot of them are only a half, up to 4 hit points, or maybe 3/4 of a hit die. And they also have a mini breath weapon, which can do the most is 8 points of damage, but some of them can only do, for example, 4. But those are really cool, and of course they say, sometimes magic users die or the dragonette escapes, and so they can be found in the wild as well. The next one is by Mark Norton. It's called the Tinfoil Monster. He describes it as being something similar to a gelatinous cube, except for it's just a giant pile of sentient tinfoil that crawls around the dungeon consuming things. And so when you kill it, if you cut it open, you can find a lot of items inside potentially. And the last one is the contribution by Jim Ward, and it's called the Darkness Monster. It's a 9-foot tall creature permanently surrounded by a 15-foot sphere of darkness. And so its method of attack is to sneak up on you until you are inside the darkness and can't see. It has tentacles that enable it to perceive where you are, and so it doesn't have any penalties on its attack. And that's the Darkness Monster. The last thing we have is the adventure, and that's the Fabled Garden of Merlin. This one is by Merle Davenport. It's another fantastic adventure, which just goes to show the people in that gaming group not only were obviously great players, but also excellent game designers. I really like this one. It's probably a session you could do, one session, maybe two. It's very well thought out. It's very well done. Has a lot of puzzles and traps and tricks to learn or work your way through as a party. Certainly not a straightforward hack and slash type of a dungeon. And so it's an excellent addition. It's a lot of fun to read. And the other thing I really like about these, a lot of the grognards have read all the TSR modules or maybe played all the TSR modules, but these fanzine have amazing early, old school feel adventures that probably a lot of your players have never seen or even heard of. So it's a great thing you can use to throw in for a lot of variety, bring back that old school feel in your games. And that's it for Fanzine Friday. That's the Dungeoneer number 2. I hope you enjoyed the video. And until next time, my friends, keep rolling 20s.